If a marriage starts as a contract, who decides when it becomes real? The question lingers in the quiet air as Clara Hayes stares at the ring resting in a velvet box between them, its diamond catching the soft glow of the penthouse lights like something far more dangerous than beautiful. Across from her, Adrian Wolfe doesn't blink, doesn't shift, doesn't offer comfort, only certainty, the kind that feels heavy, final, like a door closing somewhere she can't see. It's simple, he says, his voice low, controlled, practiced. 1 year. Public appearances. You play the role, I handle the rest. Clara's fingers tighten around the edge of her chair, the faint scent of polished marble and expensive cologne making her feel out of place, like she wandered into someone else's life by mistake. Just 12 hours ago, she was standing behind a cafe counter, wiping down chipped mugs, calculating tips in her head, wondering how long she could keep her apartment before the overdue notices turned into something worse. Now she's here, 30 floors above the city, looking at a man who owns buildings she'll never step inside, offering her a solution that feels too perfect, too clean, too controlled. And when it's over, she asks, her voice steadier than she feels. Adrian leans back slightly, studying her like she's a decision already made. You walk away with everything you need. Everything. The word echoes louder than it should. Rent paid. Debts erased. A future that doesn't feel like a constant uphill climb. Clara swallows, forcing herself to hold his gaze. No feelings, she says, more to herself than to him. No expectations. A faint smile touches Adrian's lips, but it doesn't reach his eyes. Exactly. The silence that follows isn't empty, it's charged, like something unspoken is already weaving its way between them. Clara glances down at the ring again, noticing how perfectly it's cut, how deliberately chosen, like every other detail in this room. Nothing about Adrian Wolfe feels accidental. Not the way he sits, not the way he watches her, not even the way he offered this deal as if he already knew she would say yes. That realization sends a quiet chill through her. Why? Me, she asks, the question slipping out before she can stop it. For the first time, Adrian pauses, just for a fraction of a second, but she catches it. Because you don't belong here, he says simply. Clara blinks, caught off guard. That's your reason. It's exactly my reason. His voice softens, just slightly, enough to feel intentional. You're not part of this world. You won't try to control it. Control. The word hangs between them, heavier now. Clara exhales slowly, her mind racing, weighing logic against instinct, survival against something she can't quite name. She should walk away. She knows that. Deals like this don't come without a cost, even if it's not written down. But then she thinks about the eviction notice folded on her kitchen counter, the late-night shifts, the constant pressure of barely staying afloat. She thinks about how tired she is of choosing between what's right and what's necessary. Her hand moves before her mind fully catches up, fingers brushing against the cool metal of the ring. It's heavier than she expected. Adrian watches her closely, not interrupting, not rushing, just waiting. Always waiting. Clara lifts her eyes to meet his again, something inside her settling into place, not comfort, not trust, but decision. 1 year, she says quietly. Adrian nods once, as if this moment was inevitable from the start. 1 year. And just like that, the deal is sealed, not with a kiss, not with warmth, but with something far more dangerous, certainty. The next morning does not feel like the beginning of a new life, it feels like stepping into a role she has not rehearsed for, and Clara notices it the moment she wakes up in a room that is too quiet, too perfect, too unfamiliar to belong to her, the ceiling stretching high above her, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows that reveal a skyline she has only ever seen in postcards and passing buses. And for a few seconds she forgets where she is until her eyes land on the garment bag. Hanging near the door and everything comes rushing back, the contract, the ring now resting on her finger, the man who watched her like he already understood every choice she would make. A soft knock breaks the silence before she can gather herself. Miss Hayes, a calm voice calls from the other side, polite but distant, your schedule begins in 30 minutes. Schedule. The word settles uneasily in her chest as she pushes herself out of the bed, her bare feet touching polished hardwood that feels colder than expected, grounding her in a reality she cannot ignore. When she opens the door, she finds a woman in a tailored suit holding a tablet, her expression professional, unreadable. "I am Victoria," she says smoothly. "I will be assisting you." Assisting. Clara nods slowly, unsure whether to feel relieved or replaced, as if her life has already been reorganized without her permission. Within minutes, she is guided through a routine that feels more like a transformation than preparation, stylists adjusting her hair, selecting outfits she would never dare to touch in a store, explaining posture, tone, presence, each instruction delivered with quiet precision, and Clara follows, not because she is comfortable, but because she understands this is part of the agreement. Part of becoming someone the world will believe belongs next to Adrian Wolfe. By the time she stands in front of the mirror again, she barely recognizes the woman staring back at her, polished, composed, dressed in something that fits perfectly but feels borrowed, like confidence she has not earned. "Mr. Wolfe will see you now," Victoria says, stepping aside. Clara's pulse quickens as she walks into the main living area, her steps slower now, more deliberate, her eyes finding Adrian exactly where she expected him to be, standing near the window, already dressed, already prepared, already in control. He turns as she approaches, his gaze sweeping over her, not with surprise, but with quiet approval, as if this outcome was expected. "You learn quickly," he says. Clara crosses her arms instinctively before catching herself, forcing them to relax at her sides. "I am just following the rules," she replies. Adrian's expression shifts slightly, something almost amused flickering beneath the surface. "Good," he says, stepping closer, his presence filling the space in a way that feels intentional. Measured. Because the rules matter. There is a pause, brief but noticeable, and Clara senses something else beneath his words, something unspoken. "Your phone," he continues, extending a sleek device toward her, preloaded with everything you need. "Contacts, schedule, security access." Clara hesitates before taking it, her fingers brushing against his for just a second, and she notices the way his gaze lingers, not on her face, but on that small point of contact, like it means more than it should. "Security access?" she asks, trying to keep her tone neutral. Adrian nods. "You will not go anywhere without it." The statement lands heavier than expected, not quite a command, not quite a concern, but something in between that makes Clara's chest tighten. "I thought this was just for appearances," she says carefully. Adrian meets her eyes then, his voice steady, unwavering. "It is," he replies. "And appearances require control." The word echoes again, louder this time, impossible to ignore, and Clara feels it settle somewhere deep, a quiet warning she cannot yet explain. She slips the phone into her hand, the weight of it unfamiliar, and nods, even as something inside her resists. Because in that moment, standing in a place that is not hers, holding things she did not earn, she realizes something she did not see last night. This deal may have clear terms on paper, but whatever is unfolding around her is already beginning to blur them in ways she cannot predict. The first event arrives faster than Clara expects, and it does not ask if she is ready, it simply happens, unfolding that same evening beneath a ceiling of crystal chandeliers where every light feels like it is watching her, measuring her, waiting for her to prove she belongs, and as she steps out of the black car beside Adrian, the flash of cameras is immediate, sharp bursts of white that make her instinctively tense before she remembers the instructions. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes forward, breathe, just breathe, and beside her Adrian does not slow down, does not hesitate, his hand settling lightly at the small of her back, guiding her forward with a familiarity that feels practiced, almost effortless, as if this version of them has existed far longer than it actually has. "Smile," he murmurs under his breath, low enough that no one else hears it, and Clara does, not because she wants to, but because she understands now that every second here is part of the performance. The doors open to a room filled with voices, laughter, expensive fabric brushing against polished floors, and Clara feels the weight of it instantly, the invisible line between who she was yesterday and who she is supposed to be now stretching tighter with every step. "Adrian," someone calls, and within seconds they are surrounded, handshakes, greetings, eyes turning toward her, curious, assessing, calculating, and Clara feels it all, the subtle shifts in tone, the quiet surprise, the silent questions no one says out loud. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? This is Clara, Adrian says smoothly, his voice steady, controlled, offering no explanation beyond her name, and somehow that makes it worse and better at the same time, because he does not justify her presence, he simply places her there, as if that is enough. Clara nods politely, offering small smiles, measured responses, remembering every instruction from earlier, but beneath it all she feels the pressure building, not from the crowd, but from the awareness that Adrian is always there, always watching, not interfering, not correcting, just observing, as if he is studying how she moves, how she reacts, how she fits into a world that was never meant for her. The first real test comes without warning when a woman steps forward, elegant, poised, her smile polite but her eyes sharp. Adrian, she says, her tone warm but edged, you never mentioned you were bringing someone. Clara senses the shift immediately, the room quieting just enough to notice, and for a split second she considers stepping back, letting Adrian handle it, but something inside her refuses to retreat. She straightens slightly, meeting the woman's gaze. I suppose some things are worth waiting to reveal, Clara says calmly, her voice steady despite the quickening of her pulse, and there is a brief pause, just long enough for the tension to register. Before the woman lets out a soft laugh, surprised, perhaps impressed, and the moment passes, just like that, replaced by conversation, by movement, by the illusion of ease. But when Clara glances at Adrian, she catches something new in his expression, not just approval, not just satisfaction, but something deeper, something quieter, like interest shifting into something more personal, more focused, and it unsettles her more than the crowd ever could. You handled that well, he says later, when they are momentarily alone near the edge of the room. Clara exhales slowly, her composure slipping just enough to reveal the truth beneath it. I did what the role required, she replies. Adrian's gaze lingers on her again, longer this time, more intense, as if he is no longer looking at a partner in an agreement, but at something he is beginning to claim in a way that is not written anywhere in their contract. No, he says quietly, his voice lower now, more deliberate, you did more than that. The words should feel like a compliment, but instead they settle differently, heavier, like a shift she cannot undo, and as the night continues, Clara begins to understand something she did not see before. The world she stepped into is not just about appearances, it is about control, perception, and something far more dangerous growing beneath it, something that does not follow rules, something that does not stay contained. And for the first time since she said yes, she wonders not what she will gain from this deal, but what it might slowly begin to take. The ride back is silent, but it is not empty, it is filled with everything neither of them says, the city lights streaking past the tinted windows like a reminder that the world is still moving while something between them has quietly shifted, and Clara feels it in the way Adrian does not check his phone, does not look away, his attention fixed on her with a steadiness that feels heavier than the crowd ever did, and she keeps her gaze forward at first, watching the reflection of herself in the glass, the polished version of Clara Hayes that everyone saw tonight, the one who belonged beside him without question, without hesitation. But the longer the silence stretches, the harder it becomes to ignore the awareness building in her chest. You were different tonight, Adrian finally says, his voice calm, measured, but carrying something underneath that she cannot quite name. Clara lets out a quiet breath, keeping her tone neutral. I did what was expected. Adrian shifts slightly, leaning back, studying her again in that same way that feels less like observation and more like possession forming in real time. No, he says softly, you adapted. The distinction lands sharper than she expects, and Clara turns her head just enough to meet his gaze, searching for the intention behind his words. Is that a problem? She asks. A faint smile touches his lips, subtle but deliberate. It is not a problem, he replies. It is rare. The car slows as they pull into the private garage, the quiet hum of the engine fading as the doors close behind them, sealing them into a space that feels even more isolated than the penthouse above, and when the driver steps out, leaving them alone for a brief moment, Clara feels the shift again, more pronounced now, like the absence of witnesses changes something fundamental in the air. She reaches for the door handle, ready to step out, to create distance, but Adrian's voice stops her. Clara! She pauses, her hand still resting against the door, not turning back immediately. Yes? Why did you answer her like that? He asks, referring to the woman from the gala, his tone curious, but not casual. Clara hesitates, replaying the moment in her mind, the instinct that pushed her forward instead of back. Because she expected me to hesitate, she says simply. And I did not want to give her that. There is a brief silence, and when she finally turns, she finds Adrian watching her more closely than before, his expression unreadable, but his focus unmistakable. You are learning faster than I anticipated, he says. The words should feel like praise, but something about them feels like a recalculation instead, like she has moved from being part of a plan to something he now has to account for differently. Clara opens the door then, stepping out into the cool, quiet space, the echo of her heels against the concrete grounding her as she moves toward the elevator, but she hears his footsteps behind her, steady, unhurried, always matching her pace without asking. Inside the elevator, the mirrored walls reflect them from every angle, a perfect image of something that looks effortless, composed, real, and Clara studies that reflection for a second too long, noticing how naturally they stand together, how easily the illusion holds. Tomorrow, Adrian says, breaking the silence, we will adjust your schedule. Clara glances at him. Adjust? He nods slightly. There are people you should not be around. The statement is delivered calmly, as if it is a practical decision, but Clara feels the weight of it immediately. And who decides that? She asks, her voice quiet but firm. Adrian meets her gaze without hesitation. I do. The answer is simple, direct, and it settles between them with a clarity that leaves no room for interpretation, and for a moment neither of them looks away, the tension stretching just enough to reveal what is beginning to form beneath the surface, not just control, not just protection, but something more personal, more deliberate. The elevator doors open with a soft chime, but neither of them moves right away, the pause lingering just long enough for Clara to realize something she cannot ignore anymore. This arrangement may have started as a contract, but the rules are already shifting, and the person rewriting them is not asking for permission. The next few days do not unfold like a life being lived, they unfold like a life being managed, structured down to the minute in a way Clara has never experienced before, and she notices it the moment she wakes up to a notification already waiting on the phone Adrian gave her, a full schedule mapped out with meetings, fittings, appearances, even designated personal time that somehow does not feel personal at all. And as she scrolls through it, her brows knit slightly, a quiet discomfort building as she realizes she did not agree to most of this, at least not explicitly. By the time she steps into the living area, Adrian is already there, standing by the window. Again, as if he has never moved from that position, his presence as constant as the skyline itself. You updated my schedule, she says without preamble, holding up the phone. Adrian turns, calm as ever. I refined it, he replies. Clara exhales slowly, keeping her voice steady. There are things on here I did not agree to. He walks closer, not hurried, not defensive, just certain. They are necessary, he says. Clara feels something tighten in her chest. Necessary for what? Adrian's gaze holds hers. For you to fit into this world. The answer sounds reasonable on the surface, but something about it feels off, like a line drawn without her input. Or for me to fit into your version of it, she asks quietly. For a brief moment, there is silence, and Clara sees it again, that flicker in his expression, the smallest shift that tells her she is pushing against something he does not expect to be challenged. There is no difference, Adrian says. The words land heavier than he intends, and Clara knows it. The rest of the day moves forward anyway, appointments she did not plan, conversations she did not initiate, people introduced to her as if she has always belonged here, and she plays along because she understands the agreement, but with every passing hour, the space around her feels tighter, like invisible walls are closing in without ever being acknowledged. It becomes undeniable that evening when she mentioned something simple, something normal. I was thinking of stopping by the cafe tomorrow, she says casually, standing near the kitchen, her voice light, almost testing. Adrian looks up immediately. There is no need. Clara blinks, caught off guard by how quickly the answer comes. It is not about need, she replies. It is where I worked. Adrian sets his glass down with quiet precision. That part of your life is behind you now. The statement is calm, but it lands like a decision already made, and Clara feels the shift more clearly than ever. You do not get to decide that, she says, her tone still controlled but firmer now. Adrian steps closer, his presence filling the space again, not aggressive, but undeniably dominant. I am deciding what keeps this arrangement intact, he says. Clara holds his gaze, refusing to step back this time. And what if I do not agree, she asks. There is a pause, longer than before, and something changes in Adrian's expression, something deeper, more personal, like the conversation is no longer about the contract at all. Then you will learn why it is better to, he says quietly. The words are not loud, not forceful, but they settle in a way that makes Clara's pulse quicken, not out of fear, but out of realization, because this is no longer just structure or planning or expectation. This is something else, something more controlled, more intentional, something that does not leave much room for her to exist as she was before. She looks down at the ring on her finger, the way it catches the light so perfectly, and for the first time, it does not feel like a solution or an opportunity, it feels like a boundary she did not fully understand when she crossed it, and as she lifts her eyes back to Adrian, she realizes something that changes everything. This arrangement is no longer about pretending to belong. It is about slowly being shaped into someone who does. The shift does not happen all at once, it builds quietly, layer by layer, until Clara can no longer tell where the agreement ends and Adrian's influence begins, and she feels it most in the smallest moments, the ones that should not matter but somehow do, like the way her phone vibrates before she even finishes a thought, reminders appearing as if they anticipate her choices, or the way conversations she plans to have somehow never happen because something else always replaces them, something more important, more necessary, more aligned with the life Adrian is shaping around her. It becomes impossible to ignore one afternoon when she steps out onto the terrace, craving something as simple as fresh air, only to find that even the city below feels distant, separated from her by glass and height and decisions she did not fully make. She leans against the railing, her fingers tightening slightly as she looks down at the streets far below, remembering what it felt like to walk there without thinking, without being watched, without needing permission. You should not be out here alone. Adrian's voice comes from behind her, calm as always, but carrying that same quiet certainty that has begun to follow her everywhere. Clara does not turn right away. I am not alone, she says softly. I am just outside. Adrian steps closer, his presence settling beside her without asking, without hesitation. There is a difference, he replies. Clara finally turns, meeting his gaze, searching for something she has not yet been able to name. To you, maybe, she says. Adrian studies her for a moment, his expression unreadable, but his focus sharper than before, more intent, more personal. To me, it matters, he says. The words are simple, but they land with a weight that feels disproportionate, like they carry something more than concern, something closer to possession. Clara exhales slowly, pushing herself upright. You keep saying things like that, she says. Like every decision somehow belongs to you. Adrian does not deny it. He does not even hesitate. Because they affect you, he says. And you are part of this now. The emphasis is subtle, but it is there, enough for Clara to feel it settle uncomfortably in her chest. Part of this, she repeats quietly. Or part of you? The question hangs between them, sharper than anything she has said before, and for the first time, Adrian does not respond immediately. There is a pause, brief but noticeable, and Clara sees something shift behind his composed exterior, something deeper, something that feels less controlled. When he finally speaks, his voice is lower, more deliberate. There is no clear line anymore, he says. Clara's breath catches slightly, not because of the words themselves, but because of the truth behind them, the way he says it as if it is inevitable, as if it was always going to happen this way. That is not what we agreed to, she says, her voice steady but firm. Adrian steps closer, just enough to close the space between them, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that feels different now, less distant, more consuming. Agreements change, he says quietly. Clara feels her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the realization. settling deeper with every passing second. Not without both people deciding that, she replies. Adrian's eyes do not leave hers. I am deciding now. The words are calm, controlled, but they carry something undeniable, something that shifts the balance between them in a way that Clara can no longer ignore. She looks at him, really looks this time, past the composure, past the control, and what she sees unsettles her more than anything else, because it is not just authority or expectation, it is something more focused, more personal, something that has grown quietly, steadily, without permission. She steps back then, creating space that suddenly feels necessary. You do not get to decide that alone, she says. Adrian watches her, his expression unreadable again, but the intensity remains, unbroken, unwavering. We will see, he replies softly. And in that moment, Clara understands something with a clarity she has been avoiding until now. This is no longer about fitting into his world or fulfilling an agreement. This is about something far more dangerous, something that does not follow rules or respect boundaries, something that is beginning to take shape in the space between them, and the more she tries to define it, the more it resists being contained. The tension does not break immediately, it lingers, stretching across the hours that follow like something waiting to snap, and Clara feels it in every quiet corner of the penthouse, in every glance Adrian gives her that lasts just a second too long, in every moment where silence replaces conversation because neither of them is willing to step back first, and by the time evening settles in, the air between them feels heavier than ever, charged with everything left unresolved. Clara stands near the window again, but this time she is not looking at the city, she is looking at her reflection, searching for something familiar in the woman staring back at her, something that still belongs to her, something untouched by everything Adrian has begun to reshape. You have been avoiding me, Adrian says from across the room, his voice calm, but there is something sharper beneath it now, something less controlled. Clara does not turn right away. I have been thinking, she replies quietly. Adrian steps closer, his presence steady, inevitable. About leaving, he asks. The question is direct, and it lands harder than she expects, not because it is surprising, but because it is exactly what she has been considering, even if she has not said it out loud yet. Clara finally turns to face him, her expression composed but firm. About whether this is still what I agreed to, she says. Adrian's jaw tightens slightly, the smallest sign of tension breaking through his usual control. You agreed to be here, he says. And I am here, Clara replies. But I did not agree to lose everything else. The words settle between them, heavier than anything she has said before, and for a moment, Adrian does not respond, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that feels almost unguarded now. You are not losing anything, he says, but his voice is quieter, more deliberate, as if he is choosing each word carefully. Clara shakes her head slightly. That is not true, she says. I cannot go where I want, I cannot see who I want, I cannot even decide my own schedule anymore without it being changed. Adrian steps closer again, closing the distance between them until there is barely any space left, his presence overwhelming in a way that feels intentional now, no longer subtle. Because I am trying to protect what we are building, he says. Clara lets out a soft, almost incredulous breath. Protect it from what? She asks. Adrian does not hesitate this time. From anything that could take you away. The honesty in his answer catches her off guard, not because of what he says, but because of how he says it, like it is already a reality in his mind, something he is preparing for, something he refuses to risk. Clara studies him carefully, her pulse quickening as the realization settles deeper. You are not protecting anything, she says quietly. You are controlling it. Adrian's expression shifts then, something raw flickering beneath the surface, something less composed, more personal. There is a difference, he insists. Clara holds his gaze, unflinching. Not anymore. The words hang in the air. Final, undeniable, and for the first time, the balance between them feels like it is breaking apart completely. Adrian takes a step closer, his voice dropping, quieter now but more intense than ever. You think you can just walk away, he asks. Clara's heart pounds, but her voice remains steady. I think I have the right to. There is a long pause, one that feels like it stretches far beyond the room itself, and when Adrian finally speaks again, his tone is different, softer but far more dangerous in its certainty. "You can try," he says. The words are not loud, not forceful, but they settle in a way that makes Clara's chest tighten, not with fear, but with clarity, because in that moment, she understands something she has been resisting until now. This is no longer just a contract, no longer just an agreement between two people with clear terms and boundaries. This is something that has grown beyond that, something that Adrian is no longer willing to let go of. And as she stands there, facing him, she realizes that whatever happens next will not be decided by the rules they started with, but by how far each of them is willing to push against what the other refuses to lose. The silence after his words does not feel like the end of an argument, it feels like the beginning of something breaking, and Clara does not wait to see how far it will go, because for the first time since she stepped into this world, she chooses action over hesitation, turning away from him without another word and walking toward the hallway, her steps steady even as her pulse races beneath the surface, and behind her she hears nothing at first, no footsteps, no attempt to stop her, just the quiet that somehow feels heavier than anything he could have said. She reaches her room, closing the door firmly behind her, her hands moving quickly now, pulling open drawers, gathering what little still feels like hers, simple clothes, personal items, the fragments of a life that existed before all of this, and for a moment she pauses, staring at the suitcase on the bed, realizing how little she actually brought with her into this arrangement, and how much she has already given up without noticing. Her phone lights up on the nightstand, a notification, then another, messages she does not open, calls she does not answer, because she knows who they are from without needing to check, and the realization settles deeper with each second. This is not just concern, this is not just someone asking her to stay, this is someone who is not used to being ignored. Clara exhales slowly, steadying herself, and continues packing, forcing her focus onto something she can control, something that still belongs to her. When she finally steps back into the hallway, suitcase in hand, the penthouse feels different, quieter, like it is holding its breath, and she knows before she even reaches the living area that he is there, waiting. Adrian stands near the window again, exactly where he always seems to be, but this time there is no calm distance in his posture, no detached composure, only a stillness that feels deliberate, controlled, like he is holding himself in place by sheer will. His gaze finds her immediately, dropping to the suitcase, then lifting back to her face, and something shifts in his expression, not surprise, not confusion, but something closer to realization. "You are leaving," he says, his voice quieter than she expects. Clara nods once, her grip tightening slightly on the handle. "Yes." The word is simple, but it carries everything she has not said, every boundary she is trying to reclaim, every piece of herself she refuses to lose. Adrian takes a step forward, then stops, as if calculating the distance between them in a way that has nothing to do with space. "You think this ends because you walk out that door?" he asks. Clara meets his gaze, steady now, grounded in something she has not felt in days. "I think it ends because I decide it does," she replies. The answer lands harder than anything else she has said, and for a moment, Adrian says nothing, his eyes searching hers as if he is looking for something to contradict, something to hold on to. "You are making a mistake," he says finally, his voice lower now, more controlled, but there is something beneath it, something closer to strain. Clara shakes her head slightly. "No," she says. "I am correcting one." The words hang in the air, final, undeniable, and for the first time, Adrian looks at her not as someone within his control, but as someone stepping completely outside of it, and the shift is immediate, visible in the way his posture changes, the way his composure tightens instead of loosens. "Clara," he says, her name softer now, different from before, almost unfamiliar. She pauses, just for a second, enough to acknowledge it, but not enough to stop. "This was never just a contract to you," she says quietly. Adrian does not deny it. He does not even try. "No," he admits. The honesty comes without hesitation, without defense, and that makes it more real than anything else. Clara nods slowly, absorbing it, understanding it, but not accepting it. "That is the problem," she says. And with that, she turns, walking toward the door, each step feeling heavier and lighter at the same time, the weight of everything behind her, the uncertainty of everything ahead, and when her hand reaches the handle, she pauses for just a fraction of a second, not because she is unsure, but because she knows this moment matters. This is the line between what she almost became and who she still chooses to be, and then she opens the door and steps through, not looking back, not waiting, leaving behind the world that tried to redefine her, and the man who is only now realizing that control does not guarantee someone will stay. 3 weeks later, the city feels different, not because it has changed, but because Clara has, and she notices it in the way she walks now, slower, steadier, no longer rushing to keep up with something that was never truly hers, her suitcase long unpacked in a small but sunlit apartment that smells faintly of coffee and fresh paint, a place she chose for herself without permission, without adjustment, without someone refining it into something else. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet around her feels like peace instead of pressure. She stands by the window, her fingers loosely wrapped around a warm mug, watching people move along the street below, ordinary, unguarded, free in a way she almost forgot existed, and she exhales softly, the weight in her chest lighter now, not gone completely, but no longer overwhelming. Her phone rests on the table behind her, silent for once, no constant notifications, no schedules imposed, no expectations waiting to be met. And yet there is one message she has not opened, one she has seen but chosen to leave untouched, because some things require distance before they can be understood. A knock at the door pulls her from her thoughts, unexpected but not alarming, and for a moment she hesitates, her hand stilling around the mug as something instinctive stirs beneath the surface, something familiar, something she cannot quite ignore, and when she finally sets the mug down and walks to the door, her steps are measured, deliberate, grounded in a choice that is entirely her own. When she opens it, Adrian stands there, but not as she remembers him, not framed by glass and height and control, but simply present, dressed plainly, his expression quieter, less certain, as if the absence of everything he usually commands has stripped something away, leaving only what remains underneath. For a second, neither of them speaks, the silence carrying everything that has happened between them, everything that has changed. "You found me," Clara says softly, not surprised, but not entirely unaffected either. Adrian nods once, his gaze steady but different now, less consuming, more searching. "I had to," he replies. There is no certainty in his voice this time, no assumption that she will listen, and that alone shifts something subtle in the air. Clara steps aside just enough to acknowledge the space, not an invitation, not a rejection, simply a boundary she controls. Adrian does not step in immediately, respecting it in a way he never did before, and Clara notices, even if she does not comment on it. "I thought about what you said," he continues after a moment, his voice lower, more careful. Clara crosses her arms lightly, not defensive, just grounded. "And?" Adrian exhales slowly, something uncharacteristically human in the gesture. "I was wrong," he says. The words are simple, but they carry more weight than anything else he has said, because they are not controlled, not calculated, just honest. Clara studies him quietly, searching for the intention behind them, but finding none of the usual certainty, only something unfamiliar, something closer to vulnerability. "You tried to turn a choice into something permanent," she says. Adrian nods slightly. "I did," he admits. "And I did not see the difference between wanting you to stay and trying to make you." The distinction settles between them, clearer now than it has ever been, and Clara feels it, the shift, the space where something healthier might exist if it is allowed to. "That difference matters," she says softly. Adrian meets her gaze, not pushing, not closing the distance, just present. "I know that now." There is a pause, quiet but not tense, and Clara glances down briefly at her hand, the absence of the ring no longer feeling like loss, but like clarity, before looking back at him. "So what happens now?" she asks. Adrian's expression softens, just slightly. "That depends on you," he says. "Not a contract, not an expectation, just you." The answer is not grand, not overwhelming, but it is real, and for the first time since all of this began, Clara feels something different settle in her chest, not pressure,